right, welcome everybody. I'm Christine, as you know, and this is Jimmy Le Tang. He is a CPA and awesome real estate accountant. He's my accountant, and actually Jimmy's been great whenever my clients have had questions. He's been open to helping with those questions. But anyhow, we thought that we would take a moment to talk about what is one of the hottest topics that's happening in Jimmy's business right now. What are people seeing and feeling? And so I thought, Jimmy, maybe you could share what kind of issues or what kind of things should people be aware of when dealing with real estate right now?
Absolutely. I think a hot topic right now is a lot of GST audits. The Canada Revenue Agency are looking at transactions a lot more closely. They're scrutinizing a lot of transactions. And one of the transactions that they're looking at nowadays is completions on assignments.
Okay.
The GST issue with respect to assignments, and also whether or not GST is applicable when somebody has bought a property that really is just been relisted after completion from the developer. So we'll talk a few minutes today about GST issues.
Okay.
So the first example I've got is, when you go to an open house on a property and the listing realtor says, the seller's just completed this from the developer, and we're listing this property for $1 million, right?
Okay.
And it's clearly been staged, nobody's lived in it. So then the question often becomes, does GST apply on the subsequent resale?
Okay, and just hold your thought.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, you're talking about someone has bought a pre-sale property, maybe as an investment or whatever, or maybe not. They bought it and suddenly their situation has changed. They've completed on it, and because it's new GST, they paid the GST
to the developer. Right.
And now they're deciding, I'm not moving in, I'm gonna sell it on the open market, and
right.
So GST has been paid.
Right.
And therefore maybe GST isn't applicable again. Is that what you're talking
right,
about?
That's the common conception.
Right.
But that's not really the case, is because when the Excise Tax Act doesn't really define what is used property, but one of the common things that it references is, has a property been occupied by the owner as a place of primary occupancy, right?
Okay.
And has the owner or lease the property to somebody else to occupy as their primary place of residency, right?
Okay.
And in this particular case, where somebody's bought from the developer, resold it almost immediately, or the timeline really doesn't even matter, right? The point is, it hasn't been occupied.
Right, so no one's ever lived in it
Nobody's
before.
ever lived in it, either on a rental basis or owner-occupied basis, okay. Right? So in those situations, the property is in fact new residential property on the subsequent sale.
Okay.
And therefore GST is applicable on the subsequent sale, right? And many buyers, and even a lot of realtors, don't know that. So when they're listing the property, they're saying, it's $1 million, and GST's already been paid, so it's not applicable. And often the issue of GST doesn't come up until a couple of days prior to completion, when somebody does their due diligence and realizes that, wait a minute, it should be GST on top of the sale price. And in the statement of adjustments that gets sent to the buyer a couple of days before completion, it's $1 million plus 5%, so you're going to need another $50,000.
Right, so that's a problem.
A huge problem. I don't know about you, but I don't have $50,000 to just, fork
out.
Yes, exactly. A couple of days prior to completion, I don't have that kind of money, right?
Okay.
So that becomes a really big problem, right?
Absolutely.
So, my biggest tip to, realtors alike is just to make sure you have the clause in there that it's, purchase price is GST included. If you're buying, you want to make sure you have the discussion with your realtor as well too. Make sure that you're not getting into a situation where you're going to get caught off guard by this particular GST issue.
So essentially, maybe making sure you shift any additional GST liability onto the seller of the property.
Right.
Even though they may have paid GST already, when they complete it, they may have to pay GST, or it sounds like they're going to have to pay GST again unless you negotiate that completion.
Right. Absolutely.
So tell me. So there has been this conception that you can you pay GST once and therefore it's not applicable because it's already been paid. So it feels like maybe that's been going on in the industry for a while. And is CRA just catching up to this, or has it been able to get through the system so that people aren't getting caught? And this has been more prevalent in the past, where you have to be careful. Double GST?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, the property transfer tax returns were amended to include social insurance numbers for sellers, right? And that has enabled the Canada Revenue Agency to basically just data mine, right? They'll just compare the social insurance number that's reported on the property transfer tax returns and compare that to the tax return filed for that social insurance number. And what they're looking for is if it's a transaction like that, there'll be either some sort of business income disclosure or at the very least a capital transaction disclosure. So where there is no such disclosure, that's really easy pickings for the Canada Revenue Agency to pick up on that, right? And I also want to touch on the double GST part, and I think if you're working with sellers as well, Christine, I know you work with a lot of investors, you might be on the selling side. So on the selling side, your seller who was the first buyer would have paid GST to the developer, but what a lot of people don't know is the GST paid to the developer is refundable in a transaction like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's refundable in a separate GST application for a refund of the GST. In this particular case would be called basic tax content. So if the property was $800,000 sale price, the seller, first buyer, would have paid 5% GST on that, so 40 grand, right? And that $40,000 would have been paid to the developer.
Okay.
When they go and resell the property, they would collect $50,000 on the $1 million sale price, right? Now, because they don't have a GST number, they're going to have to send that $50,000 to the Canada Revenue Agency without any deductions for input tax credits. Okay. But the $40,000 that was paid to the developer, they can go and apply for that refund in a separate application. So in effect, it is not double taxation. It's just that many taxpayers don't know that they're eligible for this rebate.
Gotcha. So that's why you got to be really careful the way you structure contracts when you're selling or buying any of a pre-sale or previous, a property that's never been occupied before. Let's get a little bit clearer on that, and make sure that you're prepared for the capital outlays that may come, which you might be able to make up for later once you're able to file and get your if you're the seller, the previously paid GST. Right? Like
Absolutely.
On the seller side. Cool.
So there's definitely lots of issues whenever you're dealing with a sale of real estate property that is not for personal use. For example, this would be a business transaction. So there's potentially a capital gain issue, business income issue. So that would be an income tax issue. We just talked about the GST issue. There are a lot of things to talk about. But for the brevity of this particular video, you can always contact me at that number.
And shoot me an email. Jimmy about all your issues.
Right? I'm a part-time psychologist. Give me a call, shoot me an email. Let me know that you're Christine's client, because if you call me or email me and say, hey, Christine's my realtor, I'd be happy to answer your phone call or your email. And I generally don't bill for that kind of stuff either. Quick answers like that would be great. It's a great way for me to support Christine's business. But if you are just calling me out of the blue and you're not Christine's client, then I don't know, I might not answer your question, okay? But thank you very much for your time. Hope you enjoyed this video. You can always reach out to Christine and myself, and we'd be happy to answer questions for you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Hope you found that valuable. Cheers.
Bye-bye.